A letter from Republican members of the U.S. Senate to Iran warning that any deal struck over its nuclear program may not survive past the next presidency. The letter has drawn major criticism from Tehran. Iran's supreme leader, the highest authority in the land, said today the letter is a sign of decay of political ethics and American power. He also said he was very worried about the prospects for a deal. Iran's foreign minister and chief nuclear negotiator used the opportunity to mock the U.S., saying Congress has no understanding of international law or the nuances of their own constitution. Iran accuses the Senate of meddling rather than trying to mediate. Critics here at home say the letter also damages America's credibility with its Western partners who have been negotiating for quite a while now to try and resolve Iran's nuclear program. They worry if America doesn't play its cards right, the U.S. could find itself going from leading these negotiations to taking a back seat as Iran tries to forge closer relations with Europe and strengthen its relations with China and Russia.
House Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy is in studio with us tonight. Good evening to you, Congressman.
Good evening.
Let's put aside what Iran today because they love to bash the U.S. anyway, so let's set that aside.
Okay.
Was the House leadership consulted by your Senate colleagues before they fired off this letter?
No, this was just done by the Senate side.
All right. So I'm curious, if the House was asked to endorse that letter, what might the vote look like, and have you signed it?
Well, if you put inside the House, I would say you'd have a bipartisan agreement that would probably sign the letter. Now, they probably would have sent the letter to the president, because what's going on right now with Iran, to me, is the most critical issue for all future generations, more so than what's happening in Russia, more so than even ISIS. If Iran is allowed to get a nuclear weapon, the world will not be the same, because every country then will have a nuclear weapon. You want to make sure that they are not able to get it. Now, the president in this negotiations is saying he may just keep them from having it for maybe 10 years. So I think we're playing too much into the letter and not enough into what agreement can we get to.
Yeah. Just for the record, though, would have you signed that letter?
You know, I have no problem with the letter itself. I think the letter would have been, if I had a choice, would be sent to the president.
Now, Congressman, this nuclear deal isn't a treaty. The U.S. has no formal diplomatic relations with Iran. So does Congress really have any legal or constitutional standing, do you think, in this matter?
You know what? I think we do, from a couple different places. And you find from both sides of the aisle, there was a bill moving that we wanted the Senate to have a say over it. This is the most critical issue before our country and before the world. And to think that we shouldn't have input, the whole reason why Iran even came to the table, because the House and Senate passed sanctions against Iran, even when the president didn't want them. But because those sanctions were working, Iran came to the table. I think to be able to show Iran that if they don't come to a good agreement, we won't have an agreement, but we won't stand for them able to develop a nuclear weapon.
And you're talking about a two-pronged crisis here, really. Iraqi military forces backed by Shiite militias and they are starting to push ISIS out of Tikrit in Iraq, and those Shiite militias are being commanded by the Iranian military leaders in the Republican Guard of Iran. So are you and your congressional colleagues concerned about how this might play out, with ISIS perhaps withdrawing on the one hand, but Iran's influence in Iraq strengthening in the Sunni heartland? We could have a civil war here.
This is a great concern. And, Jim, I was just in Iraq 3 months ago. I was in Baghdad. I was in Erbil. And it was one of the greatest concerns I have, where I see Iranian fighting with Iraq. I watched this administration not lead, and who fills the void? Yemen was held up by this administration as a good foreign policy. They have collapsed. Then you look in Libya. Who's taken over there? This has been allowing Iran to fill the void in every certain place. And then you have Russia pushing over in Europe. You have China pushing over in the seas. When America doesn't have a firm foreign policy, this is the crisis that is created. That's why it brings a great fear. That's why later this month I'll be in Ukraine as well.
Now let's move on to another issue, and you could say a crisis here at home. It's been 4 months since the elections, and a lot of our viewers are watching and waiting for action on immigration reform. As House Majority Leader, Mr. Congressman, what are you doing to get this issue back on the front burner?
Well, I'd say the president's done the most damage to start anything in immigration reform. I sat down with the president after the election, prior to being sworn in, and telling the president he should not take any executive action. Because you know what? The president had his own party controlling the House and the Senate for 2 years, and they did nothing on it. We have an immigration system that's broken. We need to secure the borders before we move forward. And that's what we pushed, and the president did something else.
I imagine that your critics, though, would say that your position right now is just an excuse for no action.
No, it's not. If you watched inside the House, look at the bills that have been brought up in judiciary, dealing with immigration, look at the bills inside Homeland Security, and look at what the president has done. The judicial system has created an injunction. The highest court in the land, the Supreme Court, just in the last year, has knocked down 2 of the president's actions because he has overstepped the bounds when he continues to try to do executive action. That creates more heartache. He's trying to play politics and try to do policy.
We're out of time. We're out of time here, but I got to ask you, any movement on a water deal to get the federal water project pumps moving? And we're running out of time, but quickly.
I would say that should be the #1 priority, and it is for mine here. I've met on the Senate side. I had an agreement with Senator Feinstein. Unfortunately, Senator Boxer blew it up towards the end of last year. I'm now working with other senators on the other side of the aisle from other states to create a Western water bill to help not just California, but the entire West. And we should not let others destroy this bill, but actually move it forward where we could find a solution.
House Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy, we always appreciate your time, sir.